Okay, we'll go right ahead then. So the idea of installment buying is that instead of paying for something all at once, you pay for it over time. And that's where we're going to start today, talking about installment buying. And one of the components that come along with installment buying are finance charges. The way that we're going to define finance charges is the amount of the purchase that is above the cost of the item. So the item has a price, but for the luxury of paying for it over time instead of paying for it all at once, we're going to have to pay a finance charge. And what we're going to consider to be a finance charge is anything that is above the cost of the item. For example, a refrigerator that costs $725 can be purchased by paying $75 a month for a year. In this situation, what is the finance charge? Well, the total amount we're going to pay is going to be, well, $75 a month for a year. So that's $75 every month for 12 months. So we're going to need to multiply by 12. We're going to make that $75 payment 12 times, and 75 times 12 is $900. So what we're actually going to pay for that refrigerator is $900, even though the cost of it was $725. And so our finance charge here, the amount that we paid above the cost of the item, will be the $900 that we paid minus the $725 that was the actual price. Subtracting those, we find out that there was $175 in finance charge. Basically, for the privilege of paying for this over the course of a year instead of all at once, it's going to cost us $175 in finance charge. Anybody have questions about that before we go into something a little more involved than that? But establishing the idea that there are finance charges when you are in a situation where you're paying for something over time is where we wanted to start out today. For this particular question, we weren't asked to find the rate at all, so I'm going to hold off on that for now. So we'll get to questions like that later on today, but for right now, we'll just leave this one as it is. Just what is the finance charge, and we'll keep it that simple. Okay, good. An important component of installment buying is the monthly payment. How much are you going to have to pay each month to get this thing paid off? And a set of tires sells for $620, but can be purchased by making 12 monthly payments with a rate of 9% simple interest. What's the amount of each monthly payment? So we want to make sure we understand the situation here before we just dive in. And to begin with, we can see that we're buying something that costs $620, but instead of paying for it up front, we're going to make 12 monthly payments. Important thing to note about those 12 monthly payments, that means we're talking about 1 year. You'll see why that's important here in just a second. With a rate of 9% simple interest. Simple interest being right there on the problem is really important part. That tells me that this formula, I equals PRT, is probably going to play a role here, and sure enough, it is. The question says, what's the amount of each monthly payment? But before we can figure that out, the first thing we have to determine is how much interest are we going to have to pay? This may not appear like a loan immediately, but in a way it is. We're not paying for the tires. They're giving me the tires, and I'm paying back this $620 quote unquote loan that I have over the course of a year. So the first thing we're going to do is figure out how much interest am I going to have to pay? Essentially, what is my finance charge? And that's going to be the principal, which is the amount that I borrowed. Now, I didn't borrow money, but I did borrow $620, or at least tires that are worth $620. So that's the amount of my principal, multiplied by the rate, which I was told was 9%. We'll make that a decimal, times the time, which, because I'm making 12 monthly payments, I know that that's 1 year. So the amount of interest that would have to be paid here is 620 times 0.09 times 1, or $55.80. Be careful. We read a problem, we used a formula, and we came up with an answer. There's a strong pull to want to say, okay, done, moving on to the next one. But wait a minute, make sure you answer the question that's being asked. And the question here is, what is the amount of each monthly payment? So it's not how much interest will you pay, it's what's the amount of each monthly payment. So we better go answer that. So what still needs to be paid back here is the $620 that the tires cost plus $55.80 in interest. If you see something that you're not sure of where it came from or doesn't make sense, you let me know. So 620 plus 55.80. So we need to pay back $675.80. But we're not going to make that lump sum. We're not going to pay that all at once. Instead, we want to know what's the amount of each monthly payment. And we're going to make 12 of those. So we have this $675.80 that we need to pay back. And we're going to divide that by 12 to figure out how much each payment is going to be. And that is 56.3166. And that keeps going. All right, I need to round this, I guess, but it didn't tell me where to round. If it doesn't tell me where to round, where do I round? Since this is a problem involving money, there is a way that we do this. Where do I round? Very good, Jessica, Ashley, you guys gave me both answers I was looking for. Arian, thanks. To the hundreds place, which is the nearest cent. That's exactly right. So find the hundreds place, we'll look one space to the right. The number in that spot is 5 or bigger. So we're gonna round this up to $56.32. So what is the amount of each monthly payment? It's $56.32. Just to sort of recap here and to walk back through what we did to answer the question that we were given. The question we were given was, okay, you're going to get these tires. They're worth $620, but instead of paying for them, you're going to pay for it over the course of a year by making 12 monthly payments. And you're going to have to pay 9% simple interest on that. What's the amount of each monthly payment? The first thing we did here, the very first thing we did was recognize simple interest and figure out, okay, how much interest am I going to have to pay? Once we had that, we're like, okay, that's good. What I need to pay back then is the cost of the tires plus the interest that I'm going to have to pay for the privilege of paying for this over a year. All right, got that. So I'm going to have to pay back this $675.80, but I'm not doing that all at once. I was told I'm making 12 payments, so we'll divide that by 12 and figure out that our monthly payment is going to be $56.32. Let me know if you have any questions on what we did there before I add one other little component to this question. Awesome. A television sells for $800, but can be purchased by making a $100 down payment and then paying the balance plus 14% simple interest in 24 monthly payments. The new thing, the thing that's in this problem that we didn't have before is this down payment. We didn't make a down payment last time. We just drove off in those tires and said, I'll start making my monthly payments soon. In this one, there's actually a $100 down payment at the beginning, and that makes a big difference when we go to do our calculations. Let's take a look at how that factors in. Okay, television sells for $800, but I can make a $100 down payment and then pay the balance plus 14% simple interest. That's important. That tells me I'm going to use that formula here to figure out the interest in 24 monthly payments. Well, 24 monthly payments, now we're not talking about 1 year, we're talking about 2 years. So this 24 is definitely important for us. It's how many payments are we going to make? And when we go to figure out how much interest there's going to be using the formula for simple interest, now we're not talking about 1 year, we're talking about 2 years. So the first thing we'll do is figure out how much interest we're going to have to pay. And okay, that is principal times rate times time. Principal is the amount of money that I borrowed, how much I owed at the beginning. Here's where that down payment comes into play. Because yes, it's true that the price of the television was $800, but I don't owe $800. When I walk out of the store, I don't owe $800. The cost was $800, but I made this $100 down payment. So what I owe is $700. I don't owe $800, I only owe $700, and that is going to be our principal. So instead of using $800 as a principal, we're using $700 as a principal, and that's because we made this $100 down payment. Let me know if that doesn't make sense. We're going to say, okay, the interest then is going to be calculated based on the $700 that I owe, not the $800 that the price was, multiplied by the rate, which I was told was 14%, multiplied by the time, which is 2 years. And so the amount of interest we'll have to pay, 700 times 0.14 times 2 is $196. Okay, so I've got $196 in interest. So overall, what I need to pay is, well, let's see, I still owe $700 for the TV, plus the $196 in interest. So I need to pay back $896. Now I got to be careful here. Last time there were 12 payments, but this time 24 payments. So I'm going to take that $896 that I need to repay and divide it by the 24 payments I'm going to make. And I get 37.33333. And just like before, this one deals with money. So we're going to round to the nearest cent. So we're going to look one space to the right. That's 4 or lower. So we're going to round this down to $37.33. So we're going to pay $37.33 every month for 2 years to pay off the television. Just like last time, the first thing we did was figure out how much interest we were going to pay. Although the down payment made me have to do a little subtraction to find out the amount of principal. Once we know the amount of interest, we can say, all right, well, how much do I have to pay back altogether? That's how much I still owe for the TV plus the interest. And then I'm going to divide by 24 because that's how many payments I'm going to make to figure out the cost of each payment. Okay. Do you have any questions on this before I have you try one? Fantastic. Here goes. The sense that I get is that you're really comfortable. Guess I'll find out here when we do this one. A refrigerator sells for $1,100, but can be purchased by making a $250 down payment and then paying the balance plus 12% simple interest in 36 monthly payments. What's the amount of each monthly payment? I'll set up a poll for this. I'll give you a little time to do it. There are several steps you have to go through. Find out what's the amount of each monthly payment. If you come up with an answer that's not one of the ones listed, go ahead and pick the one that's closest to yours. This is definitely the kind of question you can expect to see in the book and online homework on quizzes on exams. So it's a good idea to practice. And once you get a sense of, yes, I can do these, then that's great going forward. If you find that you struggle, then I want you to ask questions about whatever's giving you trouble. And we'll go another 30 seconds on this and then talk about it. All right, let's see where we are. Unanimous. Outstanding. Very good. Okay. Well, that's usually a good indicator, but if you have questions you want to ask as we go through it, make sure you let me know. So this refrigerator sells for $1,100. It's purchased by making a $250 down payment. We want to make sure we take a note of that. Paying the balance plus 12% simple interest. So this is going to play a role in 36 monthly payments. 36 months, that's 3 years. Important to make a note of that when we go to find out how much interest we're going to pay. And then right away, okay, the refrigerator sells for $1,100, but I don't owe that when I leave the store because I paid $250 as a down payment. So I have the $1,100 minus the $250 down payment means that what I owe when I leave the store is $850. The interest that I'm going to pay is going to be calculated based on that. And I have to remember that that's what I have to pay back when I go to calculate that number. And so when we find the amount of interest, that's going to be what I still owe on the refrigerator, not the original price, times the interest rate of 12%, times the time, which in this one is 3 years. And so the amount of interest to pay is $850 times 0.12 times 3, or $306. Really good that nobody had 306 as their answer. That's excellent. Sometimes we get kind of locked in. I used a formula, I got an answer, I must be done, but we want to make sure we answer this question. What's the amount of each monthly payment? So I still need to pay back. Well, I still owe $850 on the refrigerator plus $306 in interest. So together, that's $1,156 that I need to pay. And that $100,156 is going to be paid over the course of 36 payments. So we'll divide by 36 and get $32.11 as our monthly payment. That's rounded to the nearest cent. It didn't come out perfect, but since everybody who responded to the poll got it right, I think the rounding part is probably okay. Our focus on installment buying is going to be about monthly payments like that one. So I feel really good about where we are, but if you have any questions about what we just did there, let me know. Yes, Kevin, that's right. When we use the formula I equals PRT, time is always in terms of years. So if it were 6 months, we would use zero point 0.5 for time, for example. Those are unusual, but they may come up from time to time. Perfect, perfect. All right, a little bit about credit cards. Credit cards have a 1 month billing cycle. And while it may coincidentally start on the first of the month and end on the last day of the month, or some credit cards are actually set up to do it that way all the time, it's typically whenever you opened your account that day of the month, that's the start of the billing cycle. And it goes all the way through the end of that billing cycle. Thing about billing cycles is they always start on the same date each month. So if you had a credit card account and the billing date was March 10th, then the next billing date would be April 10th, and the next billing date would be May 10th, and so on. It would just always be on the 10th. And so what happens in cases like this then is when we look at that 1 month billing cycle, it's going to run starting on March 10th, it's going to go until the next month, which is April 9th, because the next billing date is going to start on April 10th. And then this billing date that starts on April 10th, that's going to go all the way into May and end on May 9th, because the next billing date is going to start on May 10th. And then I imagine you've seen the pattern at this point. May 10th is going to go all the way through the June 9th. And one of the things we'll be asked about is how many days are in a billing cycle. Now, our first instinct might be, well, it's a month, so it's 30 days. Well, you and I both know that not every month has 30 days in it. So not all billing cycles have the same number of days. And what we want to do when we go to figure out how many days are in the billing cycle is we just want to investigate that billing cycle. If we look at this one over here that goes from March 10th to April 9th. Now, one thing you could do is kind of count them on your fingers. March 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th. That might get a little tiring. So instead, what we're going to do here is focus on the end of the month that it passes through. This billing cycle passes through the end of March. And so the number of days that are in March, that's going to be the number of days that are in our billing cycle. Now, you might think, gosh, how many days are in March? There's a little jingle that I was taught somewhere along the way that I've always remembered, and it's 30 days have September, April, June, and November. So 30 days have September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, and February is easy to remember because it's so strange. But 30 days have September, April, June, and November. There's other ways you can do this thing with your knuckles where you can kind of see the months that have 31 days. You may have something else that you use to remember how many days are in a month. Main thing here is, since this billing cycle passes through the end of March, it's the number of days that are in March that let us know how many days are in the billing cycle. I don't know how many days are in March, but I know 30 days have September, April, June, and November. Since I don't see March over there, March must have 31 days in it, which means this billing cycle must have 31 days in it. Moving over to the next one. All right, this one starts on April 10th and goes to May 9th. So it goes through the end of April. So April is going to tell me how many days are in the billing cycle. 30 days have September, April, June. April has 30 days, so this billing cycle has 30 days in it. And the thing I want you to notice here is the month in which the billing cycle starts, that's the one that tells us how many days are in the billing cycle. The month where it starts tells us how many days are in the billing cycle. And the reason for that is that's the month that we get to the end of. If you look at that first billing cycle over there on the left, it ends on April 9th. We never get to the end of April. So the number of days in April doesn't matter. We never get to the end of April. It's March that tells us how many days are in the billing cycle. And then when you look at this billing cycle here in the middle, we never get to the end of May. So the number of days in May doesn't matter. What we actually get to is the end of the month of April. We pass right through it. And so it's the number of days in April that tell us how many days are in the billing cycle. Finally, the one over there on the right, because that goes from May 10th to June 9th, that means this thing passes through the end of the month of May. So the number of days in May is what's going to tell us how many days are in the billing cycle. 30 days have September, April, June, and November. May must have 31. So there's 31 days in that billing cycle that started on May 10th. It's the month that the billing cycle starts in that tells us how many days are in the billing cycle. That's a key idea that I want you to take away from that. If you happen to have a cool way of remembering how many days are in each month, feel free to share that with us. That'd be great. Okay. Credit cards have a finance charge associated with them. This isn't exactly the same as what we did when class first started. When class first started, we were talking about paying for something on an installment plan. How much would your finance charge be for the privilege of being able to pay for this one item over the long term? Credit cards instead, if you don't pay off the entire balance, credit cards will assess you a penalty. Well, penalty is the wrong word, just a charge. You didn't pay your balance off, so because you're carrying a balance, there's going to be a charge associated with that. And that monthly finance charge that goes with credit cards is found by doing this calculation right here. This formula is in your book on page 155, I believe. And we want to make sure we know what everything means in there before we just start using it. So the first thing you'll see here is the monthly finance charge is the ADB. That is the average daily balance. That's ADB, the average daily balance. When doing this computation, what the credit card company does is they keep track of your balance every day of the billing cycle. So on day one of the billing cycle, you owed $100. And then on day 7 of the billing cycle, you owed $400. And then you made a payment. So on day 12 of the billing cycle, you only owe $200. And what they do is they add all that together every single day, divide by the number of days in the billing cycle to come up with the average daily balance. So your monthly finance charge isn't calculated based on what your balance looks like at the end of the billing cycle. It's the average all the way through the billing cycle. And that's called the average daily balance. The ADB is what we'll use as an abbreviation. The next thing in the formula is APR. And APR is annual percentage rate. That's the interest rate on your credit cards. How much would you pay if you owed that amount over the course of the entire year? Although, when monthly finance charges are calculated, it's a monthly finance charge. So instead of looking at the whole year, that annual percentage rate is divided by 365, 365 days in a year. So essentially what you get right here is like a daily percentage rate. It's how much interest you would owe for each day. And then we multiply that by how many days there are in the billing cycle. So we've got a daily interest rate multiplied by however many days there are in the cycle, multiplied by your average daily balance. And that's how they calculate what your monthly finance charge is going to be for your credit card. I'd like you to know where the formula comes from and what everything represents, but I also want to make sure you can use it. So let's go ahead and read this question we've got here. If a credit card account has an average daily balance of $850 and has an annual percentage rate of 14%, and there are 31 days in the billing cycle, what would the monthly finance charge be? We're just going to use this formula here to find the monthly finance charge for a credit card. And our monthly finance charge will be, all right, average daily balance of $850 multiplied by the annual percentage rate, that's 0.14 divided by 365, multiplied by the number of days in the billing cycle, which we were told was 31. So we just need to simplify that. We've got this division right here. The fraction, I don't love having that there, so I'm going to go ahead and do that first. You don't have to do that first, but that's my suggestion, is do this first. After we take care of that division, now we just have three numbers to multiply together. So we'll go ahead and do that division first. That'll be 0.14 divided by 365. What happens is we get a really, really little number there. We have 850 times 0.000383. It makes sense for that to be a really small number because if we think about what it represents our daily interest rate. Well, if it's 14% over the year, it's going to be a pretty small number for a day. And that's why we get a really small number there. The good news is we can leave that number on our calculator. The only thing we have to do now is multiply by 850 and then multiply by 31. So we'll multiply by 850, multiply by 31, and we end up with a monthly finance charge here of 10.1068. This is about money. I wasn't told how to round, but because it's about money, I know that I need to round to the nearest cent, which is the nearest hundredth. So I'll find the hundreds place. I'll look one space to the right. That's 5 or bigger, so we'll round this up to $10.11 will be our monthly finance charge for this particular situation involving a credit card. We use the average daily balance, we use the annual percentage rate, and we use the number of days in the billing cycle. Does anybody have questions about what we did there using that formula before I have you try one? Okay, here goes. If an account has an average daily balance of $500, an APR of 16%, what would the monthly finance charge be for a 30-day billing period? Here again, this type of question you can expect to see in homework, on a quiz, on an exam. So go ahead and try to solve this. We'll figure out if you're really comfortable with it already, or if you have trouble, we want to find that out too. If you get something that's none of those choices, pick the one that's closest to yours. If you're comfortable doing this now, you can feel pretty good about the fact that you'll be comfortable on a homework or a quiz or an exam. That's not to say you shouldn't practice, but you're in a good spot. Oh, the poll's covering it up. They're 30 days in the billing cycle. Yeah, 30 days. We'll go another 20 seconds and then talk about this one. Let's see where we are on this one. Unanimous again. Outstanding. All right, today's going great. Let me know if you have questions as we talk through this. So our monthly finance charge here will be the average daily balance of 500 multiplied by the APR of 16% divided by 365 multiplied by the 30 days that are in this particular billing cycle. The first thing that I'll do, and you don't have to start here, but I think it's kind of nice to go ahead and clean that thing up, that 0.16 divided by 365, 0.000438. And I'll just leave that on my calculator, and now I just need to multiply by 500 and multiply by 30, and we get 6.5753. This is about money, so we're going to round to the nearest cent, which is the nearest hundredth. That's 5 or bigger, so we'll round this up to $6.58. So the monthly finance charge here is $6.58. Again, fantastic work on the poll. Please let me know if you have questions. Just because a lot of people are getting them right doesn't mean everybody's comfortable, so don't hesitate to ask questions if you have them. Okay, sticking with credit cards. Now we're going to talk about, instead of just the finance charge, we're going to talk about the balance due. How much is it that you need to pay to the credit card company if you want to take your balance all the way down to zero? The way we find that is we take the balance at the end of the month and add the monthly finance charge. So here we're going to have to find the monthly finance charge, but then we're going to do something with it. We're going to have to tack that onto the balance at the end of the month to end up with the balance due. An example of that would be for the billing cycle that ended on November 5th. The average daily balance on Karina's credit card was $325. If the balance on November 5th was $600 and the APR on the card is 17%, how much is the finance charge? Also, what is the balance due on November 6th? This is one of those times where I'll say again, and I say it a lot in this chapter, make sure you answer the question that's being asked. On a homework, a quiz, or an exam, you'd probably only get one of these. You might get how much is the finance charge? You might get what is the balance due? We're going to answer both of those here, but when you work these out, I want to make sure that you're thinking, I better answer whatever they've asked me to do here. Now, the first question was how much is the finance charge? And that's the formula that we've been working on a little bit. Our monthly finance charge will be the average daily balance. Average daily balance was $325 multiplied by the APR, which is 17% over 365. And let's see, how many days were in the billing cycle? Uh-oh. Let's see here. This says, doesn't tell me how many days are in the billing cycle. It says the billing cycle ended on November 5th. So my question to you is how many days were in that billing cycle? If it ended on November 5th, How many days were in that billing cycle? And what you want to think about here is what month did the billing cycle go through the end of? Because that's the month that matters. And then how many days are in that month? So if a billing cycle ended on November 5th, how many days are in the billing cycle? And if you get this wrong, it's okay. But excellent, Jessica. Very good. If it ended on November 5th, then that means that this billing cycle went from October 6th to November 5th, which means that that billing cycle went through the end of the month of October. The billing cycle started in October, and it's where it started that matters. And let's see, 30 days have September, April, June, and November. Nope. October must have 31 days. And so this billing cycle must have 31 days. Be really careful there. There's a real urge on this one to say, well, it's November, 30 days. Hold on. It's not where it ends that matters. It's where it starts that matters. And this started in October. And so it's a 31-day billing cycle. So our monthly finance charge here, and 0.17 divided by 365, I get that really small number, times 325 times 31 is $4.69. I went ahead and rounded to the nearest hundredth. Because y'all have done so well with those polls, I feel like you're pretty comfortable here. If you're not, if any of those numbers didn't make sense, please don't hesitate to ask about it. So $4.69 is our finance charge, but there was a second part of this. And the second part of this said, what is the balance due on November 6th? To find the balance due, this is where the ending balance comes into play. You'll notice up to now, they gave me a whole bunch of information in the question. For the billing cycle that ended on November 5th, yeah, I used that because that's how I figured out how many days there were. The average daily balance was 325. Yep, use that. If the balance on November 5th was 600, hey, I haven't used this yet at all. APR I used. Okay, so if the balance on November 5th was 600, well, what we want to think about in this case then is because the ending balance is going to be what is the balance when the end of the billing cycle happens. And the end of the billing cycle was November 5th, the balance on November 5th. So this 600 here, that's our ending balance. So when we want to find the balance due, we're going to take our ending balance, which was $600, add it to the finance charge, which we found to be $4.69. And so the balance due is going to be $604.69. If Karina wants to pay off her credit card completely, she'll need to pay $604.69. Essentially, what we did here was find the monthly finance charge and then take it one step further to get the balance due. Let me know if you have questions on this before I have you try one just like it. All right, here goes. For the billing cycle that ended on December 9th, the average daily balance on Joe's credit card was $500. If the balance on December 9th was $350 and the APR on the card is 13%, what is the balance due on December 10th? Notice the question just asked for balance due, but you will have to find the monthly finance charge first in order to answer that question. I'll go ahead and make a poll for this one. like the other polls we've seen today, this is the type of question you can expect to see. And if you find that you're feeling comfortable with it now and able to solve it now, then that sets you up great. If you struggle at all, or if you're not sure of anything, I want you to ask questions. Uh, let's go another 40 seconds on this, and then we'll talk about it. If you need more time, you can let me know. Let's see how we're doing on this one. Okay, our first one not unanimous today. Let's go ahead and take a look, and we'll see what happened here. All right, so for the billing cycle that ended on December 9th, average daily balance was 500. If the balance was 350 on December 9th and the APR is 13%, what's the balance due on December 10th? So we're asked for the balance due, so we're going to need to use this formula, but a part of that is the monthly finance charge. So that's the first thing that we're going to have to find. And the monthly finance charge will be our average daily balance, which was 500, times the APR, which is 13% over 365, times the number of days in the billing cycle. All right, let's see here. This billing cycle ended on December 9th. That means it started in November. It went from November 10th to December 9th, which means that this billing cycle passed through the end of the month of November. And so it's November that tells us how many days are in this billing cycle. Where did the billing cycle start? Not where it finished. We never get to the end of December, so it doesn't matter how many days are in December. We do get to the end of November, so it's the number of days in November that matter. 30 days have September, April, June, and November. Aha, November is a 30-day month, so this is a 30-day billing cycle. With that in mind, we'll go ahead and figure out our monthly finance charge here. 0.13 divided by 365 times 500 times 30 is $5.34. Now we finally, after all of that, get to go up here and find the balance due, since that's what we were asked for. Our balance due here, we want to pay off this credit card completely, is, let's see, the balance at the end of the billing cycle was $350. So it's that $350 plus the $5.34 in monthly finance charge, so that our total balance due is $355.34. Let me know if you have any questions about what we did there to arrive at that balance due. Make sure to remember that the finance charge is based on the number of days in the billing cycle, and that billing cycle has the number of days in the month where it started, not where it ended. All right. One more idea for us today. That idea is payday loans. The first thing I want to say, if there's nothing else we get with payday loans, it's that they're terrible. They're absolutely horrible. Unless it's a crazy emergency, please don't do it. Payday loans have an annual percentage rate that are significantly higher than credit cards. Here's an example. Cheatya's Loan Emporium will loan you $400 for 2 weeks and will charge you $50 in interest. What is the APR for this loan? So what we're being asked to find here is what is the annual percentage rate. Keep in mind, we're only borrowing the money for 2 weeks. So after we figure out the percent interest we're paying, we have to say, wait a minute, that was only a 2-week loan. What would the annual rate be? If I borrowed money at this pace for a year, what would that rate look like? So the first thing we're going to do here is figure out, what percent interest did we pay? And really what that question is we paid $50 in interest on a $400 loan. So really what we're asking here is 50 is what percent of 400? Because the interest that we paid, okay, what percent of that is of what we borrowed? The interest is what percent of what we borrowed. That's what we're working on here. 50 is what percent of 400. This takes us back to the very beginning of chapter 2. Kind of nice when those old skills resurface and we get to use them again. And so this will be 50 is what percent of 400. In order to get that x by itself, we'll have to divide by 400 on the right, divide by 400 on the left. Those will cancel. And what we'll find here is that 50 divided by 400, I get 0.125 is equal to x. Now that's a decimal answer. And as you probably remember from earlier in the chapter, we're looking for a percent. So we need to turn that into a percent. So we'll move the decimal 2 places. And what we end up with here is 12.5%. Well, that doesn't sound so bad, 12.5%. That's not horrible. Wait a minute. Here's the wait a minute, is that was for 2 weeks. We're looking for an annual percentage rate. What would it be if we borrowed this money for a whole year? Anybody know how many weeks there are in a year? Great, thanks, Ashley. So a year is 52 weeks. Now, we did borrow this for 2 weeks, so we don't have to multiply this by 52, but we'll divide this by 2 weeks because there are 26 of these 2-week periods in a year. So, there's 52 weeks in a year. We borrowed the money for 2 weeks, so there would be, divide those, there'd be 26 of these 2-week periods in a year. So I borrowed the money for 2 weeks and the rate was 12.5%. In order to see what that would be in the course of a year, I'm going to have to multiply by 26, because to get to a whole year, there'd be 26 of these 2-week periods. So I need to take that 12.5% and I need to multiply it by 26 and find out that over the course of the year, this is a 325% interest rate. Because they're going to charge me 50 bucks every 2 weeks. So they'll charge me 50 again and 50 again and 50. They're going to charge me that 50 bucks 26 times. And when they've done that, now we're looking at an interest rate of 325%. Crazy. Don't do payday loan if you don't have to. I'm going to have you try one like this. But before I do that, I just want to see if you have any questions about what we did here. Okay, here goes. Rabia's Loan Emporium will loan you $200 for 2 weeks, and you will have to repay them $240. What's the APR for this loan? One thing I will say here is the interest isn't 240, but that's the only hint I'll give you after that. So no more hints after that one. The interest isn't 240. You have to pay them back 240 and they loaned you 200. So you can figure out what the interest was and go from there. What we're after is what is the annual percentage rate for this loan? I'll set up a poll for it to give you a chance to try. This is another type of question you can expect to see. Um, and and to be honest with you, this is probably in section 2.5. This is the type of question that is often most challenging for students. So go through this one, see if you're comfortable now. If you're comfortable now, then you are probably in a pretty good place with doing these when it comes time to complete the homework or quiz. If you have difficulty with this, I want to go ahead and help you clean that up before you start working on any of the assignments for this week. Let's go another 30 seconds on this and then we'll talk through it. Okay, let's see where we are. Okay, those of you who did it agreed. Not that many did this one. That makes me a little bit nervous, but let's go ahead and talk through it together. And you ask questions if you have them. So at this loan emporium, they're going to loan me $200 for 2 weeks, and I have to repay them $240. What's the APR? The first thing here is I have to repay them $240, and they loan me $200. So the amount of interest here is $40 because it's the $240 I have to pay them minus the $200 they loan me. So $40 is the amount of interest. And so then the question I need to ask here to find out my interest rate is 40 is what percent of 200? And we'll write that as an equation. 40 is what percent of 200? And then to get the x by itself, we'll go ahead and divide on the right by 200, so those cancel. If we divide the right by 200, we have to divide the left by 200. And so 40 divided by 200 is what x will be. And that's 0.2. But that's a decimal answer. And the question here was about the percent. So I need to convert that to a percent. I'll move the decimal over 2 places and have 20%. So we're paying 20% of the loan in interest, which in and of itself wouldn't be terrible if that were for a year. It's still pretty high, but not crazy high. But this wasn't for a year, this was for 2 weeks. And we're after the annual percentage rate. Since there are 52 weeks in a year, and this is just for 2 weeks, we have to divide those and see that there are 26 of these 2-week periods in a year. And so I need to take that 26 and multiply it by that 20% and end up with an APR of 520%. Crazy interest rate number. On the surface, I don't know, $200 for 2 weeks. I give you back $240. It doesn't sound that crazy. But when you calculate what the APR is for that loan, it's 520% interest, and that is crazy. You definitely don't want to be in a position where you're paying that kind of interest rate. So the moral of the story with the payday loans is, stay away from them at all